Now, before going into business for myself, I was a history teacher for about 10 years. I taught at both the high school and the college level. And one of the things that history teachers in particular do, if there's not a definition in the book for something we want to teach or talk about, we just make up the definition. So I would dare say that most of the history books in America today and most high schools probably do not even mention states' rights, let alone give you the definition. So I'm going to give you the McBerry definition of states' rights today. The definition of states' rights is the right, and I believe responsibility, of the states to stand up for the people's liberties against the unconstitutional encroachments of an out-of-control federal government. And folks, if there's ever been a time that that was true in America, it's true today. We have an out-of-control federal government. I'm excited about being a Georgian because Georgia has a long, rich history in standing up for states' rights and state sovereignty. And so those of you who are our honored guests from other places in America, let me share with you a little bit of our heritage here in Georgia about standing up for states' rights and state sovereignty. 5 short years after the Constitution of these United States was ratified, there was a man from another state who tried to sue the state of Georgia in the federal courts. His name was Chisholm, so the case is Chisholm versus Georgia, 1793. You can look it up when you go home. Now, in the case of Chisholm versus Georgia, the federal judge issued an order to the state of Georgia demanding that the state of Georgia come and appear before the federal courts so that they could hear the case and rule on the matter. Now, here's what Georgia responded in 1793. By the way, these were the founding fathers in 1793. These weren't some people making up their own interpretation of the Constitution. These are the men who wrote the Constitution. 1793, here was Georgia's response. We will not come and appear before the federal courts on this or any other matter because it was the states who created the federal government, not the other way around. Therefore, we're the master and you are our servant. Amen. And if you like that part, you're really going to like this part. The state of Georgia went on to say that any federal agent caught within the boundaries of the sovereign state of Georgia attempting to enforce these unconstitutional measures would be, and I quote, arrested and hanged by the neck until dead without the benefit of clergy. Now, friends, I'm here to tell you that the problem we dealt with in 1793, just 5 short years after the Constitution had been put into place, is the very same problem we deal with today in the 21st century. It is an out-of-control federal government. I think all of us are familiar from our high school history or civics classes with the 3 branches of the federal government, legislative, executive, and judicial, and how they were all 3 given checks and balances on each other's power, so that no one branch of the federal government became more powerful than the other 2 branches. But what happens when all 3 branches of the federal government are out of control? And that's where we're at today. The good news is that our founding fathers were wise enough to see that also. And that's what the 9th and 10th Amendments to the Bill of Rights is all about. To part of our Constitution, states' rights and state sovereignty is the solution for all those federal encroachments, and all that remains is for us to have governors and representatives in each of our states who will stand up to Washington, and every single time Congress passes one more unconstitutional thing, or every time the White House issues one more executive order, or every time that self-righteous Sanhedrin of the Yankee Federal Supreme Court issues one more unconstitutional ruling, our governors in every state stand up and say, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, show me where you have the authority to do that or keep that stuff out of my state. You know, our founding fathers understood that the Constitution is a contract. And just like that contract that you have with your mortgage company or your bank for your mortgage, that contract is a written, binding document. It's not some nebulous idea floating around in space that either party can change on a whim on their own accord. But that's what we're told today by many in Washington that our Constitution is. It's some living, breathing document that just changes with the winds of time. Folks, that's not what it is. It's a contract. And by the way, let me make this very clear. That contract was made between the several states. Those states created an entity called the federal government. The federal government was not party to the original contract. It's a creation of the contract. Therefore, it is only an agent or a servant of the states. It has no ability to stand up to the states and infringe upon their liberties. They are the ones who are parties to the contract. Amen. And it is those states who have the moral and the constitutional obligation to enforce that upon their agent, the federal government. Now, I'm going to speak to you just briefly about several issues because I know that we all understand that our liberties are under attack today. How many of you in the room, let me see your hands, how many of you in the room would agree that the right to keep and bear arms is a God-given right? All right. I'll say what I usually say. All the men in the room raised their hand, and I think most of the ladies too. You know, the right to keep and bear arms is a God-given right. It's not a right that was given to us by the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment merely acknowledges that right that we already possess. And I understand that the Second Amendment is not the only one of our liberties that is currently under attack. But it is the liberty that guarantees and safeguards all of our other liberties. Because if we lose the right to keep and bear arms, we very quickly, in short order, will lose all of our other liberties. You can mark it down. And you can also mark it down that the enemies of our liberty are coming for our right to keep and bear arms. They've already done it in every other free republic in the Western world, and it is coming to America. In fact, the Obama administration just nominated and had confirmed the most anti-gun attorney general in American history in Eric Holder. He is even more anti-gun, if you can believe it, than Janet Reno was under the Clinton administration. Their plans are to take away your right to keep and bear arms. And we'd better start finding elected representatives, beginning with the governor, our state representatives, and congressmen who will stand up for our right to keep and bear arms. I think many of you probably, like myself, heard the horror stories coming out of Hurricane Katrina during the catastrophe just several years ago, when in the aftermath of that storm, FEMA and other federal agents were literally going around trying to confiscate the weapons of law-abiding citizens in the aftermath of the storm. I am not talking about trying to confiscate the weapons of the vandals, the looters, the robbers that were breaking into people's homes. I'm talking about federal agents going up and knocking on the doors of law-abiding citizens at their residence and demanding that they turn over their firearms because it was a federal emergency zone. Now, let me tell you what any states' rights governor should have said in any one of those states. And let me tell you what Ray McBerry has already gone on record with Fox News in Atlanta as saying months ago, that when I become the next governor of Georgia, I will put Washington on notice that the first time I find any federal agent in my state trying to disarm one law-abiding citizen, that federal agent's going to find himself sitting in a Georgia jail waiting for someone to come bail him out.